let me welcome uh, our our guests for today's discussion. We are discussing the Russian invasion on Ukraine and the effects on the world order. And it is my great honor to welcome our speaker, Dr. Tomáš Šmura, the director of the research office at the Kazimir Pulaski Foundation. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We are recording this discussion on the 17th of March. So the war is ongoing now for almost 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks. And but in my first question, I would like to ask a bit about how we arrived here, and ask you how did you perceive the build-up to the war in the previous months? What was your perception? What was your perception about the Western alliance, the Ukrainians and the Russians, and how did we get here?
Sure. Let me start with some general observations. Of course, the Russian aggression against Ukraine was a kind of shock for the whole international community. To the very end, many of analysts, including myself, were hoping that Putin was bluffing, and he was counting rather on any unilateral concession from the US or Ukraine, which let him save his face. The military analysis supported, of course, such kind of conclusion, as the forces that Putin gathered around Ukraine, which was according to the US Department of Defense assumption, was between 160,000 to 190,000, which are clearly not enough to conquer and first of all control whole Ukraine. As we know, Ukraine is significant military power. It has armed forces of more than 200,000 soldiers. So regarding that in military terms, to be sure that you win the battle, you need to have like 3-4 times advantage of your competitor, of your enemy, to be sure that you win. Putin hadn't enough force to start this invasion. So we expect that Putin again tried to build the military power around Ukraine, just to force the Ukrainian authorities to give some concession, like resignation from the NATO membership. But nevertheless, he decided, I think that based on the very pure cost-benefit and military analysis assumptions, to launch the aggression against Ukraine, with the result as we see. Yes, so definitely Russians right now have problems on Ukraine. They haven't achieved their military goals as to circle and cut down Ukrainians' capital Kyiv and the force fighting around Donbas Ukrainian forces by cutting them from any support. So right now we are discussing any kind of compromise around Ukraine. So for sure there would be not the clear military and strategic victory of Russians against Ukraine. So we are in this situation right now. But nevertheless, the whole the Russian operations, Russian invasion against Ukraine, it's for the countries as Poland and some Central and Eastern Europe states. especially Baltic states and others like Romania, is not surprised because for many years we have emphasized that Russia is kind of, that Putin Russia, of course, is kind of aggressive power, which geopolitical arm is to recreate the kind of Soviet Union kind empire with the sphere of influence, with the buffer zones. We had the clear the ring bolts before, like Russian invasion against Georgia in 2008, like the illegal annexation of Crimea and Russia invasion against Donbass in 2015. Of course, the Russia for many years have been building significant military power, and with clearly offensive the military capabilities we see in Ukraine right now, like short-range ballistic missiles, long-range cruise missiles, and so on and so forth. Russia spent Russia launched huge military modernization programs worth around $600 billion. Regardless these issues, these dimensions I mentioned, I think that the whole operation was not surprise for many countries. Of course, the perception of Russia in some of our Western partners was a little bit different, but I think like in Poland, we expect that sooner or later the Russians would launch their huge military machine against any of neighbors. And I believe personally that the aggressions against Ukraine for Putin, if he succeeds, it will be not the last part of the story, and probably he will be continuing his aggressive offensive policy against neighbors with the clear goal of undermining the NATO, the transatlantic community. So probably if he succeed in Ukraine, he will be continuing his actions also maybe in military terms against sensitive countries of the eastern flank, maybe Baltic states or Poland.
Yeah, you have mentioned that Poland was right, and of course for many years we had the discussions about the real intentions of Russia, and it was always known in the think tank community that Poland is more. The Polish experts are thinking that Russia will attack, and some other colleagues in some other countries were always toning down the threat of a Russian attack. And now we are here in 2022, and Russia did attack Ukraine. But you've also mentioned that you were surprised that Putin launched this invasion with so few forces. So my question is, how do you see the state of the Russian military that is right now operating in Ukraine? Because on one hand, they have surprised many with their attack, partly by launching this attack with so few forces. But on the other hand, they had the modernization and spending billions of dollars, as you said, on weapon system. So what's the state of this Russian military that's operating in Ukraine? And do you have a notion that Russia is holding back some forces to maybe, as you've alluded to expand the military operation in the future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that the first point is that in analytical community, in think tank community, we a little bit overestimated the Russian military power, and I believe that our Russians also have started to believe in their own propaganda. concerning their military power. Of course, Russia it's significant the military power. Their armed forces are around 900,000 soldiers, with around 300,000 soldiers in the army. And they, of course, spend significant part of their total budget for their armed forces. But nevertheless, as we see Russia's military equipment, structures, and many other dimensions are mostly based on the Soviet Union heritage. So the wide range of the Russian military equipment, there are upgraded Soviet Union designed systems as fighters Su-27, the T-72, T-80 mine battle tanks, and so on and so forth. Russia, of course, started to implement to their armed forces like modern constructions, like for example T-40 mine battle tanks, but the progress was limited. Of course, Russia, it's still, Russia. Sorry for being a little bit racist, but there is a lot of ineffectiveness in their economy. I believe that also in their military industry. So even if they spend like significant money for military modernization, probably wide part of it, it's not spent effectively to the maximum extent, let's say, in this way. So we see that Russians clearly have problems in Ukraine. They have problem with the logistics, with the communications line. Ukrainians used the quite well-prepared guerrilla warfare kind of operations against lines of communication using anti-tank, anti-armored directed missiles, UAVs, and so on and so forth. So I believe that as I mentioned, that Russians probably also because the system itself, we saw just before the operation how Putin treated his own advisor like head of his intelligence. So I believe that there was almost nobody in the Putin circle to explain him that with such of forces around Ukraine, it will be very difficult to conquer and control this country. Putin just gave his general clear order that you need to conquer Ukraine in the next 1 or 2 weeks, and nobody discussed with that. And I think that this is a problem right now. But nevertheless, remember that as I mentioned, Russia is still significant military powers, and probably if they launch campaign not against Ukraine but against, for example, Baltic states, which would be not supported by the whole NATO, the operations would look like a little bit different, because clearly Ukraine is second the biggest country in Europe with more than 40 million population. So it's much more difficult to control such kind of countries. But nevertheless, we should be still serious about Russian military potentials. Fortunately, according to the U.S. Department of Defense, we not see right now the total mobilizations of the Russian troops around whole country. So probably I believe that Russia. It's my hope that Russia would not want to continue this war for next couple of weeks or months. And right now, the goal is to find kind of acceptable compromise both for Ukraine or Russia based, for example, on the neutral state of Ukraine, as it was discussed in the press in the recent days.
So one of the factors that will decide how favorable is that that peace deal to Ukraine is, of course, the Western support, or I could say the Western support with their global allies. So you have mentioned that there was a degree of miscalculation on the West side, underestimating the sheer will of Putin to attack Ukraine. But on the other hand, there is a remarkable show of unity and support going into to Ukraine. How do you judge the results of the NATO and EU aid to Ukraine? And you wrote a policy paper recently about particularly about weapons transfers that would be the most beneficial to Ukraine. And I would like to ask you to elaborate on that. What would be the systems that would be most useful for the Ukrainian defense?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first symptoms of general Western support. So as we discussed, the first symptoms of the possible Russian attacks on Ukraine were visible for months. The U.S. administration has reported on several occasions that based on their intelligence, an invasion is practically inevitable. Because of that, the Russian aggression has surprised the West for less than the similar move by Moscow in 2014. So even before the first tanks rolled into Ukraine, a number of NATO countries had begun working towards strengthening NATO's eastern flank defense. Poland, for example, has seen the arrival of the 18th Airborne Division from the US, the Royal Marines Commandos from the British Army, as well as of the number of the Allied fighters and helicopters. Romania saw the arrival of the second cavalry units and also the enhanced forward presence in the Baltic states were enhanced by NATO first. So I think that NATO reactions was quite acute and strong against the background of the whole build-up before the invasion and after that. Of course, many of the member states, starting with the United States, decided unilaterally to support the Ukraine with military equipment, like we discussed, anti-armed directed guide missiles, short-range air defense missiles, like Stinger or Polish Piorun system. But of course, as we discussed, I really believe that the war which is right now on Ukraine, it's a NATO war as well. It's the war of the whole transatlantic community. As we discussed, Putin has clear geopolitical goals, and his next aim after the Ukraine, it will be undermining the NATO credibility and destroy transatlantic community. So maximum, weakening of the Russian force in the Ukraine is clear goal for the whole transatlantic community. So definitely we need to support Ukraine to the maximum extent. Of course, the Ukrainians effectively have stopped the progress of the Russian forces, but as we discussed, Russia is still significant military power. They've got their reserves and they can continue their operation against Ukraine by next weeks or months. So definitely we need to do more to support Ukraine. So that as we are during the war, so it's not easy. It's even not possible to support Ukraine with advanced military system of the Western origin, as we discussed, like for example fighters or air defense, the short, the medium range or long range missile defense, air and missile defense system. It will be not possible to train Ukrainians, the soldiers, with such kind of equipment. So mostly what we can do is to support Ukrainians with the equipment which they know and they use. So as you mentioned, in countries of the NATO eastern flank, as Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, and Baltic states, we've got a large number of the advanced military systems with the Soviet Union origin, which are known and are used by the Ukrainian armed forces. They include short air defense systems, as we are discussing right now, S-300, S-125 used by Polish Air Force and some other countries. We've got a quite significant number of the mine battle tanks, the T-75, T-72 family. Only in Poland, around 300 of those tanks are in our storages. So with the whole equipment we've got in Central and Eastern Europe, we could probably arm 2-3 heavy divisions of Ukrainian armed forces, which of course it's not easy. But even if we give to Ukraine a part of this equipment, it can significantly change the situation of the ground. As we see that there is many Ukrainians who want to continue the battle against Russia. There is many volunteers with some military trainings. Ukraine has reserve of around 900,000 troops, which need to be armed. So what they need it's equipment. But of course, you know, this kind of support cannot be, because of the security reason, unilateral projects of given countries. So I believe that first of all, you know, if for example Poland decided to give Ukrainians advanced military systems like artillery, mine battle tanks, air defense system, helicopters, the Russians could interpret it as direct engagement of Poland in the conflict and use some retaliatory actions, maybe including the military ones against Poland. And secondly, you know, it's not so easy that country as Poland, for example, give to Ukraine 1/3 of its air force capabilities, or almost whole air defense equipment. So it would need to be replaced somehow by the allies, mostly by the United States, which as our only country in the NATO, such kind of capabilities to replace the whole in Polish armed forces, if we decided for such kind of transfer. So definitely we need to talk about wider NATO program of transferring I don't know, procuring or transferring the military equipment from Central and Eastern Europe to NATO or to United States government, and after that, as an international program, it should be sent to directly to Ukraine. Because as I mentioned, yeah, we shouldn't treat this as Ukrainian war. a conflict in which we are neutral, because you know, if we didn't stop Putin in Ukraine, we would have to stop him in Baltic states and Poland in the next couple of years.
So if we're talking about the kinds of initiatives that you have been laying out of giving massive weapon systems to Ukraine, these are of course taking time. So we cannot speak about a rapid war. You envision this war can last for at least weeks or months. So you don't think that this will end quickly. This would last for some time. Am I right?
Yes, I think so. Right now we see that Russians are not able to break the Ukrainian defense line. They have a clear problem, as we discussed, with the logistics, with the communication lines, and so on so forth. Russians units are simply tired. They have lack of you know, reserves, and so on and so forth. So probably right now, I believe that Russia's tactics is to yeah, it's clearly to increase the brutality of the war. So as we see, the Russians continue the attacks also against the city, against the cities, against civilian infrastructure, that just to force the Ukrainian authorities, you know, to maybe not resign from the continuation of the campaign, but to give the Russians concessions they expect. But as we see that, on the other hand, the Ukrainians' morale are quite high. Ukrainians are decided to continue the battle. But on the other hand, Ukrainians also have not such significant power to beat Russians on the field. So probably we will see, as we discussed, the war which will last at least several weeks until one of the sides will be not such tired to soften its position during the negotiation. I hope it will, of course, it will be Russian that because of on the other hand, you know, the lack of progress on the battlefield, and on the other hand, the effects of the Western sanctions against Russian economy and circle around Putin. So those people around Putin will influence him somehow to soften his negotiation position. But I don't believe it's a matter of the couple of days. It's rather a matter of weeks, maybe even months.
So, like we were discussing for a long time, the intentions of Russia in its neighborhood and ambitions. For a long time, the think tank community was also discussing the future of NATO, and last year for the Warsaw Security Forum, you've published a piece which was discussing the upcoming strategic concept of NATO and raising all the questions about the Eastern, the Southern strategic direction and the role of China, the empowerment of China, how it affects NATO. So now we have a completely new situation. How do you see the role of NATO going forward now that there is such a direct threat manifesting on the eastern flank? How will NATO recreate itself in the upcoming months because of this war?
Sure. Against you know, it's of course it's not the soccer game when we would like to show that, you know, we scored a goal against the West, but it's another time, you know, and of course it's not reason to be proud. And personally, I would rather prefer to be wrong from the beginning. But again, as a NATO Eastern flank, we were right that the NATO basic role should remain the collective defense and being prepared against any kind of traditional military threat which are around Europe. So I think that the situations and the developments on Ukraine support the vision which were advocated by NATO Eastern flank countries, that the NATO role should remain the military security of the member states. And I hope that it will. I'm sure that it will be the case. But the traditional security will be emphasized in the new NATO strategic concept. Of course, other dimensions will not diminish, like the climate issues, like China, the rising power, and so on and so forth. They are still important and remain important. But as we see, the conflict, the Russian aggression against Ukraine will influence almost all dimensions of the European security. So right now it's very difficult to discuss, for example, European energy politics without the issue on Ukraine. So right now we are discussing how to build our independence from the natural resources for Russians, and maybe we will need to change a little bit our European climate policy and extend, for example, the possibility of using coal in our power plants. Of course, not coal from Russia, and sooner change it into renewable resources. But nevertheless, also when it comes to European Union, we are also in the process of discussing European the strategic compass, and we see against the background of the Russian aggressions, the vision of European autonomy as any kind of body which could replace NATO in the future is not really convincing. So as we see that it was United States which was clear leader in enhancing the security of European states. So United States as a first decided for significant military support for Ukraine. It sent their armed forces units to Poland, to Baltic states, to Romania, to other countries. And on the other hand, we see the ambiguous German policy towards whole the conflict. So we saw that the Germans for a long time they had clear problems with the decision about cutting Russians from SWIFT for military support for Ukraine. Of course, finally they decided, but against against the background of the pressure from their allies. So I had personally problem with imagining European Union as any kind of replacement of NATO when it comes to the military security of the member state. So I believe that discussion about any possibility of the European Union strategic autonomy as any kind of alternative for NATO, it's not longer valid.
Let's turn to Russia after the conflict. Hopefully, let's assume that the war will end with with a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, and Ukraine doesn't have to give concessions, only maybe minor diplomatic ones that are right now discussed. But still, Russia, even if it loses the war, it's going to be a very different entity than before. It's going to be still have the regional ambitions, but we are seeing more control over its own population and a military fiasco. Even if the sieges occur, now they just spend too much time with the war, unlike their previous plans. So how do you see the role this Russia will play in the world politics after this war?
Okay, I will probably sound a little bit hawkish, but for me, you know, the war against Ukraine also ruined this myth that Russia is inevitable member of the international community. So with the aggression against Ukraine, Russia proved that its aggressive state, it's not responsible part of you know, the kind of international circle which can take responsibility for the world security and peace. And as we see, if Russia behave even worse, you know, with the bombing civilian facility, the population in Ukraine, they behave even worse than North Korea or Iran. So I can't see any reason why we should treat Russians better than North Korea and Iran until the Putin circle rule this country. So Russia, we see I want to emphasize it again. It's not inevitable member of the international community, and we can quite well live without Russia in our European family. It's a myth that Russia is economic power. So we both know that Russia economy is a little bit bigger than Spanish or Italians, and probably we can also survive without Russians' natural resources. Of course, it costs us a little bit, but I cannot find the arguments to support Russian war machines with our Western money for oil and gas. And you know, if we impose hard sanctions on the North Korea and Iran, we can for sure impose such kind of sanctions against the Putin regime. So I believe that until Putin and his circle rules the Russia, they should be totally excluded and isolated from the international community. So and we for sure we can survive without Russia. And the only you know, possible scenario when we come back to the let's say business as usual with Russia, it's replacement Putin with the Bureau, but not another Medvedev or people from his closest circle who Putin will be able to easily control. But until there will be democratic elections with Russia, with the completely new democratic government, for me it should be like precondition to invite Russia against to the bodies like G7, G20, international institutions and international organizations. So until Putin and his clique, corrupted clique, Russia, I can see and I can believe that we should continue the cooperation with his team.
And how do you think that the other major power reacted to this conflict? I mean, we can see that the only two countries which are really supporting Russia are North Korea and Syria. Not even Belarus is. Belarus is a very difficult situation, being next to Russia. So nobody relevant is really supporting the Russian invasion on Ukraine. But there are many countries who are trying to be neutral. How do you see their role, especially China, India? How can they be convinced that that what Russia just did now with invading Ukraine is not something that you can be neutral about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So you're right that the China position vis-a-vis the Russian invasion against Ukraine is ambiguous. So on the one hand, of course, China it's the quite close and good partner of Russia. So they have the common geopolitical goal of undermining U.S. the position as the let's say hegemon of the leader of the world and transatlantic community. And both China and Russia would prefer to see kind of balance of power systems in the world. And of course for China, Russia, it's quite important economic partner when it comes to natural resources. It's a source of the oil and gas for China, and also like military equipment know-how, which benefits also Chinese armed forces modernization. But on the other hand, we know that Chinese also had some interest in Ukraine. They were interested in invest money in, for example, Ukrainian defense industry. Ukraine was also on the path of One Belt, One Road industrial projects. So I don't believe that Russia's invasion and total control of Ukraine would be in the interest of Beijing. So and of course there is a third dimension that Chinese right now see that Russians have a clear problem in Ukraine, which can weaken their position, their strength. And they prefer the Russians to stay quite strong as a partner against United States in this big geopolitical game. But on the other hand, the weaker Russia is Russia which will be dependent on China. Yes, so probably if we decided to resign from the natural resources for the buying from Russia's, the Chinese can increase the import of foils from China, but of course Chinese are quite good negotiators, and probably they buy it for half price or something, yes, which will be not also in the interest of Russia. So I believe that Chinese vis-a-vis this conflict have not like clear visions, so it's not for sure in the interest of China, but they still cannot show that they are against their quite important partner, which is Moscow in this huge geopolitical game.
Thomas, thank you very much for analyzing the situation. We are of course in the third week after the third week of the war in Ukraine, and a lot of things are still ongoing. And of course, thank you very much for outlining the path for NATO member states on how they can support Ukraine and the relevance of this war for the whole alliance, the whole transatlantic alliance. I would recommend our viewers to read Kazimir Pulansky's Foundation's pieces on the war, and of course the Anta József Knowledge Center's analysis on the situation, and we are going to continue discussion in the future. Thomas, I want to thank you once again for sharing your views.